Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Catalyze Yourself. I'm Gayatri, and today we are stepping into a conversation that invites us to widen our lens, to take all that inner work we've been doing and place it in the larger context of something bigger than us. Today, we focus on how every single one of us creates an impact onto our surroundings. And this can be inspirational. And this can start creating that legacy of who we are. Up until now, we've been focusing and journeying inwards. We've explored how we notice, how we feel, how we return to our presence. We've talked about self-leadership, healing, regulation, and reflection. And all of those matters deeply. But there's something we need to focus on a little bit more. We don't grow in a vacuum. Our self-leadership does not live in isolation. The way we heal, the way we respond, not only show up in ourselves, it shows up in how our surroundings are impacted by us. Think of us as that pebble that is dropped in water. The nature of the water will help it fall to its depths. But you know what else that happens? The nature of that pebble and its impact creates ripples in the water. And those ripples extend far beyond that point of impact. That is influence. That's the bigger picture. That is what we belong to. And that is what is shaped by us, even as it shapes us. Somewhere along the way in our lifetimes, we have experienced this. Let's think about the somber scene. Everybody is in a pensive mood. Suddenly, it turns light and happy. Why? Because someone entered that space and just with their presence shifted the mood for everyone. Let's think of another scenario, an event. It's in chaos, and you see it starting to move into consensus. Why? Because someone came into that space who was willing to step up and ask for it. Someone finding out about a historical family member's achievement. This may be a scenario we have faced. And now we see that they're getting inspired to create the same impact. As humans, this is in our nature to influence our surroundings and the universal longing to belong, to feel that we matter, to remember that we are not invisible. We will impact each other. And this impact can be positive and filled with growth, or it can be chaotic and filled with destruction. And sometimes this impact can also be neutral. And in time, when it's neutral, we will see we start feeling restlessness because of it. Restlessness because we start to see that we don't matter. We didn't make a difference. Until we recognize that this lack of impact is not because we are not capable. It is because we were not fully present. We were on autopilot, moving in conditioned responses and patterns. But this is what we must remember. A neutral impact is still an impact. It's the impact of absence. And while it might feel neutral, it often leaves the space unchanged and stagnant. And we know this. It is a matter of time when there is no growth that decay starts. Truth of the matter is, not everything we touch is going to transform, but everything that we bring presence to now becomes more available for growth, big or small. So regardless of the type of impact, positive, destructive, or neutral, each of us make a difference for ourselves in the bigger picture of the world that surrounds us. Just as we've been shaped by our families, workplaces, communities, and culture, we are also shaping those systems in return. We hold more influence than we even realize. And that's what this episode today is all about. How our presence, our personal, becomes relational in all around us. How the inner world that we build becomes our outer impact. How the clarity we hold inside begins to gently shift what surrounds us. We will explore what it means to live as part of a bigger picture, not as a witness, but as a conscious participant. We will reflect on the systems we've internalized, the systems we may go about disrupting now without even realizing it, and the systems we are repatterning just by living in alignment. Because when we lead ourselves with care, we are not just gaining insight, we are creating safety, permission, possibilities, opportunities. The other aspect of our internal world, our thoughts, our emotions, our quiet awareness, is that it is affected and dependent on the level of self-integration we have already achieved, and is shaped every day by what we are surrounded by, the energy of the home we grew in, the expectations of our culture, the beliefs we've inherited from generations before us. All of that influences how we show up without our awareness if we are not integrated. And that influence of our outside world sometimes can show up as support. Sometimes it shows up as pressure. Sometimes it shapes us so quietly that we didn't even realize it until we start feeling misaligned and we are not able to explain why. And when we are caught in that, when we are reacting to what's around us without noticing what's happening within us, we are not leading ourselves. We are being pulled by the outside world. We are trying to keep up. We are trying to belong. We are trying not to make waves. And that's when something begins to feel off. We begin to feel that unease, that restlessness, because somewhere within us, we know we are not leading ourselves. We are being led by someone else, something else, like a pawn, by habit, fear, approval, old stories and narratives. And the moment we return to presence, when we pause, when we check in, when we ask, is this truly mine? Something shifts. We stop absorbing everything and we start becoming discerning. And that's where we begin to notice our influence, not as something we are trying very hard to create, but it's something that already exists. It exists in how we enter a room. It exists in how we hold a boundary. It exists in how we are responding when others are being reactive. It exists in how we model steadiness, even when things around us are anything but steady. And this is how we begin to create an environment that is aligned with us and not just one we consistently respond to. Because our presence doesn't stay with us, it's felt, it shapes how others are experiencing us. It is giving permission, even when we are not even actively thinking of doing that, just by being. When we are clear, others begin to sense our clarity. When we are grounded, others find steadiness in it. And the opposite is just as true. When we are off centers, others feel it too. And this is why this work matters so much, not just for our own peace, but for how we show up in the spaces that matter the most for us. Because the environment we are part of not only shapes us, we shape it too. And when we feel this, maybe we didn't have the words for it, but when we feel this, we know something has shifted. This is when you think back, reflect on it, you will notice many different scenarios. Maybe it was a morning where everybody in the house was rushing, edgy, short-tempered, until somebody chose to soften, to pause, and to say, it's okay, let's take a breath. And without even trying to fix anything, the whole rhythm of the room begins to change. Or maybe it was a meeting where tensions were rising. People were talking over each other, energy was just spinning up, and it took one person with presence who says something calm, steady, and grounded, and we start seeing that the room has now recalibrated. These moments that you've experienced are not accidents. That is influence. It's not the kind that needs volume or control, but the kind that emerges when we choose not to get swept up and instead become the steady point in the current. And this isn't about being responsible for everyone else's experience either. It is not about becoming the emotional anchor for every room we walk into. Nope, it's not about that at all. It is about remembering that the clarity we hold within ourselves with no effort has a ripple effect just because of the nature of it. That's presence. It's not just an inward practice. Presence is a holistic practice because it's personal and relational. Because when we lead ourselves from within, we don't just change our choices. We change the energy we bring, and that energy, it shapes the space we are in. And that is how we begin to live as active participants in our bigger picture, not just responding to whatever's happening around us, but by influencing and contributing to it intentionally, consciously, with care. And when we begin to lead ourselves from awareness, not automation, something subtle but undeniable starts to shift, not just within us, absolutely around us. Our presence starts influencing our surroundings. There are narratives, for sure, we've heard it all, that says influence is something we have to project outward through our words, our titles, the power we have, our platforms. But when you really look at it, you will see influence is not something we push. Influence is something we become. Your presence is the influence when that colleague who usually guards their thoughts starts opening up to you. Your presence is influence when that friend who had always rushed around slows down in your presence. You are the influence when your child or your partner feels like they don't have to perform around you because you have stopped performing around them. And that's what it means to live from a centered presence. You're no longer mirroring chaos. You're no longer reacting to the loudest energy in the room. You have chosen gently, intentionally, to bring a different rhythm. And over time, that rhythm invites others into theirs. And that's your nervous system, steady. That's your mind, not rushing to fix or flee. That's your conscious holding space for the moment. And through that, becoming the anchor for others who have forgotten what stillness even feels like. The most lasting influence we'll ever have is how we make others feel in our presence. And we cannot be calm if we are living in internal chaos. We cannot invite others to be still in their truth if we have abandoned ours. So instead of pushing to be heard, we can choose to become a place that others feel safe enough to listen to themselves. That's the bigger picture. one we don't need permission to enter. We're already in it. We're already shaping it with every interaction, every breath, every choice to show up fully and not hide behind a habit. And every time we choose to bring our cognition, emotion, and consciousness into conversation, we make that impact conscious, present, alive, true. We often think of our bigger picture as something far outside of us. That world stage, the major news cycle, celebrities, politicians, world leaders, major systemic shifts. Yes, those are all real. The bigger picture also lives very much closer to each of us. It lives in our everyday impact. It lives in the way we show up in the spaces we enter, the tone we set in our interactions and our surroundings, the permission we offer just by being a little bit more present, a little bit more honest, a little bit more grounded. And for us, the bigger picture might be a workplace culture that shifts because you chose to speak differently. A family dynamic that softens because you chose presence over pattern. A friendship that deepens because you decided not to shrink yourself anymore. A community that begins to trust more because you held clarity without judgment. The bigger picture isn't always a grand vision. Sometimes it is simply accumulation of smaller everyday moments, small choices that we repeat, that we make every day, that quiet integrity we carry, the way we choose to stay in moments that's felt by those around us. That's what is creating the influence. And that is what is creating safety. And that's what's creating lasting change. And that change, that shift to presence from control to clarity, is influence. Think of the sun. No matter what, it remains in its essence, shining and blazing away. It does not go to every tree, every plant, and every leaf and force it into photosynthesis. It does not. It insists on the Earth's ecosystem to adapt and sustain itself. It simply shines steadily, completely, without apology. And in its essence, that presence, it creates an impact all around it in the solar system. Growth begins, energy is activated, life is responding. And that's what happens when we lead from our essence, from within. Because when we lead from awareness, when we reconnect to our values, when we regulate our nervous system and express from alignment, we do not have to announce the shift. Our environment feels it. The people around us adjust to it. The system we are part of, whether that's family, team, community, culture, start responding. Self-awareness helps us catch ourselves before we keep autopiloting the habits that we've inherited. We don't need to fight the past. We just choose differently in the present. Self-inspiration steadies us. It becomes the quiet reason we no longer chase urgency. We hold to what matters, not to be right, but to be rooted and steady. Self-regulation changes the emotional climate, not by suppressing our emotions, but by processing it and translating the signals, the information it is bringing with it, and choosing our response that aligns with our intentional presence. And when we're steady, our nervous system feels safer. Others feel safer. They feel the space of safety where they once felt tension. Self-expression becomes clarity in real time. Our truth does not overpower, it only clarifies. And every time we halt, when our old patterns rises, every time we rise, when we ground in intention, and every time we shift, when we choose aligned action, every time we reflect and recalibrate with gentleness, we are sending out a signal, not just to ourselves, but to the people and spaces around us. We are kind of becoming like the sun, not forcing change, but creating conditions for it. Our bigger picture expanding is not about doing more. It's not about controlling, convincing, or even directing. It is about how our presence begins to shape the atmosphere around us. And when we begin to live from presence, we start seeing the shift. It's quiet at first, sometimes invisible, but in time we will see it is absolutely meaningful. Some people may feel more at ease when they're with us, not because we've changed them, but because something in our steadiness offers them permission. Our clarity becomes an unspoken invitation, not a be like me space, but more like you can bring more of you here safely space. And in other places, we might feel a releasing and a detaching. Certain relationships or roles that once felt central in our lives begin to fade away in intensity or frequency, not because of conflict, but because something in us is no longer available for patterns we used to carry, which is the patterns that those relationships or scenarios existed in. This is where your rejection of those relationships or their rejection of your growth becomes your protection for your peace and growth. Because influence is not force. It's not whether others agree with us or follow our lead. It is about the energy we hold consistently, quietly, and how that energy ripples out through every interaction we are part of. And this is how we contribute to our bigger picture. Not by claiming space, but by becoming more fully ourselves and letting that fullness shape what surrounds us. Because we're not separate from our environments. We are in a relationship with our environment. And as we change, the environments we are in begins to change too. We begin to attract new resonance, new people, places, and things that feel aligned with the steadiness we now hold. And some things, roles, dynamics, relationship will fall away. Not as a loss, but as a natural evolution. And the more intentional we become of our awareness, our regulation, our expression, the more clearly we begin to see our place in that bigger picture. Not as a fixed point, but as a participant in something living, dynamic, evolving. And this isn't about having a perfect impact. It is simply about recognizing that the way we carry ourselves, our presence, our honesty, our willingness to stay is creating a pattern. And sometimes that pattern becomes a rhythm others can step into. Sometimes it creates that pause that allows something new to come in. And sometimes it creates that quiet permission for someone else to be a little bit more themselves. And we may never know the full extent of how our energy shifted a space. We may never see how our choice to respond instead of react opened a door for someone else to feel safer. But it is happening. And the more we keep choosing with presence, the more that impact grows. Not loudly, not suddenly, but in a way that is sustained and enduring. Through the way we speak, the way we listen, the way we lead ourselves. And that's not small. That kind of impact, it echoes even in the moments we don't see it. Just like that ripple of that pebble in the pond. It goes so far beyond what we can even see. So, before we close today, let's take a quick breath together. And let's ask ourselves with gentle curiosity, where have I been thinking I am just one person when in truth, I am part of a larger unfolding? Where have I been underestimating the influence I carry simply by being present, steady, and real? Where might my growth be quietly inviting change, even when I've not noticed it? Because the bigger picture is typically not built in one grand gesture. It is formed through the small, everyday moments we choose presence over pattern. The moments we speak with care, the moments we listen with compassion, the moments we show up not to control, simply to contribute. That's what makes our presence part of something so much greater. So if this week brings you into rooms where your clarity feels different, into conversations where your steadiness is met with silence, into spaces where your energy doesn't match what's around you, stay with yourself, because the big picture is still forming and your place in it, it's needed just as you are. And next week, episode 20, Everyday Conscious Leading. We'll step into the daily application of all that we've been building. We'll talk about how conscious leadership shows up not just in big decisions, but in micro moments, in how we enter meetings, hold boundaries, respond to tension, and lead with clarity, even when the room is not doing the same. Because when leadership becomes a way of being, a moment becomes an opportunity. Every moment becomes an opportunity to lead with presence. Thank you for being here today. I am Gayatri, and I'm so grateful for the time we share in this space. Until next time, keep noticing gently, keep choosing with care, and keep living into your bigger picture, one moment, one ripple, one aligned choice at a time.